The sky was burning. Not red, but alive, a living, howling thing that tore at metal and bone alike. Captain Elias Hawk Monroe gripped the control column of his B-17 Flying Fortress Heaven's Door until his knuckles bleached white. The bomber shuddered under the pounding flak. Each blast lit the cockpit in pulses of orange, like the heart of a dying god. "Christ Almighty, they're zeroing in on us," yelled Frankie, the navigator, his voice breaking through the roar of engines. His maps fluttered, edges charred from a flash of fire that had seared through the nose glass minutes earlier. "Hold it steady," barked Monroe, fighting the stick. His throat felt raw, his lungs thick with smoke and sweat. "Stay tight on formation. The Krauts want us to scatter." Below, the German city of Bremen burned in streaks of red and black. Columns of smoke twisted upward, colliding with the bombers as if trying to drag them back down. The B-17s of the 379th Bomb Group carved across the sky in jagged, wounded lines, half the formation already gone. In the rear turret, Sergeant Wolf scanned the horizon. Fighters, 3 o'clock high. 2, maybe 3 Messerschmitts. Monroe's eyes darted to the right window just as tracer fire flashed past like sparks from a grinder. Metal screamed. A bullet tore through the fuselage near his shoulder, leaving a neat, smoking hole in the aluminum skin. "They're coming around again," Wolf shouted. "Frankie, get your head down." Frankie didn't answer. He was staring at the horizon, where another bomber had just vanished in a burst of flame. 1 second it was there, the next, a falling sun. Monroe's voice cut through the radio static. "Navigator, talk to me. Lost sight of our lead bird. We're off course. Find us a new one," Monroe ordered. He couldn't afford panic now. Not from himself, not from anyone. Heaven's Door had taken hits to 2 engines already. They were running on hope and hydraulics. The cockpit vibrated like a living creature trying to tear itself apart. Corporal Jennings, the tail gunner, came over the intercom. "Sir, I got one. Sent a Messerschmitt down smoking." Monroe's lips twitched into a grim smile. "Good work, Jennings. Don't stop now." For a moment, the sky opened, a patch of blue between clouds and fire. It almost looked peaceful. Then, from above, another B-17 came hurtling down through the smoke, its engines aflame, spinning end over end. "Dear God," whispered Frankie. Monroe saw the insignia flash by, the white star on gray wings. "Another American bird. Pilot's out of control," Wolf muttered. "He's gonna." The words were swallowed by the shriek of engines. The falling bomber tore through the clouds like a blade, and in that instant, Monroe realized it was directly above them. "Brace! Brace!" he screamed. The world exploded. Metal hit metal in a shriek that shattered every nerve. The upper plane smashed into Heaven's Door from above, its landing gear gouging through Monroe's fuselage. The cockpit went dark, instruments burst like glass fruit, and something hot slammed into his shoulder. The sound wasn't an explosion, it was a collision that felt endless, a groaning of tortured steel refusing to die. Monroe's head hit the console. For a heartbeat, there was nothing, no sky, no sound, only white static in his skull. When he came to, the first thing he noticed was the light, dim, orange, flickering. Flames licked along the interior, painting shadows across the cockpit. The engine still roared, but wrong, uneven, unholy. "Frankie? Wolf?" "Still here," came Wolf's voice, strained but steady. "Navigator's bleeding but conscious. Tail's half gone." "Sir, what the hell just happened?" Monroe blinked away blood. Through the cracked windshield, he saw the impossible. Above them, another B-17 lay jammed atop theirs, the 2 fuselages locked together in a grotesque embrace. The nose of the upper plane had collapsed into Heaven's Door's dorsal spine, its wings splayed wide like broken arms. He could read the faded letters across the upper fuselage, Mary Jane. 2 fortresses, Wolf muttered. They're fused. Monroe reached for the radio. This is Heaven's Door, anyone reading me? Mayday, mayday. Static. Then a voice, faint, crackling. This is Mary Jane. Who the hell, who's under us? Monroe froze. The voice was tight, breathless, but alive. This is Captain Monroe, 379th Bomb Group. We just had a little dance, I think. Lieutenant David Harper, 401st. We're on top of you, literally. Despite the chaos, Monroe let out a hollow laugh. You're telling me. He looked through the cockpit window. Smoke trailed in a long, ghostly ribbon from the twin planes. The upper bomber's wings had locked with his, their gears and skin meshed like welded bone. Can you fly? Monroe asked. Engines 2 and 3 are gone. I've got partial control on 4, but she's dead weight otherwise, Harper replied. You're sitting on my fuselage. If either of us bails, we both spin. I figured that. A pause. You hurt? Monroe flexed his shoulder. Pain shot through him like a bolt, but he forced a chuckle. I'll live. Can't say the same for this bird. Frankie moaned from behind. Wolf was already at his side, wrapping a torn sleeve around the boy's bleeding arm. He'll make it, Wolf said. Long as we keep her steady. Outside, the air was a maelstrom of smoke and ash. They were dropping altitude, slowly, unevenly, but still falling. The altimeter needle quivered like a dying heart. Monroe steadied the yoke, testing the response. We've lost hydraulics. Flaps are half dead. But she's gliding, sort of. You're carrying us, Harper said over the radio. Then hang on, Lieutenant. We're not done yet. They drifted through cloud banks thick as smoke from a crematory. The smell of burning oil filled the air. Sparks fell through the cockpit like slow rain. Jennings' voice crackled through the intercom. Sir, the top plane's crew, they're waving. I can see movement in the top turret. Any fires? Yeah, but nothing spreading fast. They're trying to put it out. Monroe exhaled through gritted teeth. His mind worked the way it always did under fire, ruthless, methodical. Altitude low. Engines half dead. No escort. No formation. 2 bombers welded together, over enemy territory. He was flying a coffin with wings. Harper, he said. You've got bombs still? Affirmative. We didn't get the chance to drop. Keep them armed but locked. If one falls through my roof, we won't be around to argue about it. I copy. Harper's voice was hoarse, but steady. Any chance of reaching England? Monroe glanced at the gauges. We're bleeding fuel. Nearest safe fields over the channel. If we don't get shot down first. A pause. Then Harper said quietly, hell of a way to meet, Captain. Monroe almost smiled. You're telling me. Let's make sure we both get to tell someone about it. For the next hour, they flew in tense coordination. Every adjustment from one plane rippled through the other, a fragile balance between gravity and grace. Monroe called out throttle changes, Harper echoed them. When Harper's engineer shouted that their right engine was overheating, Monroe eased left to counter the drag. The 2 bombers moved as one, groaning, screaming, defying physics. Night began to creep across the clouds, the last light fading from the horizon. The world below was hidden, just the ghostly shapes of villages and rivers rolling beneath. The radios buzzed with half-dead signals, lost bombers, broken formations, distant cries for help. At times, the sky went completely silent, save for the slow churn of engines. It was in those silences that Monroe felt it, the weight of everything. The dead airman falling through the clouds. The smoke curling toward heaven. The strange calm of surviving when others hadn't. He thought of his brother, Daniel, killed at Pearl Harbor. He'd joined the Air Corps after that, vengeance dressed up as duty. But tonight, vengeance felt hollow. There was only survival. A sudden jolt snapped him back. Wolf cursed. Port wings catching fire again. Get the extinguisher. Monroe barked. Flames licked along the wing root, glowing through the fractured glass. The bomber shuddered violently. Harper's voice came through the radio, ragged. We've got it up here too. Fire spreading from my number 2 engine. Cut the feed. Starve it. Trying, damn it, it's. Static swallowed his words. For 30 seconds, all Monroe could hear was the crackle of flame and the hollow thud of his heart. Then Harper's voice returned, panting. We're good. Fire's out. Lost the engine completely, though. Then we're down to 3, Monroe muttered. He adjusted the pitch, trying to keep the airflow steady. The control column fought him with every move. Sweat ran down his temples, stinging his eyes. The smoke outside thinned. Through it, a sliver of moonlight spilled across the 2 bombers. For a moment, they looked almost serene, twin giants locked in a deadly waltz. Wolf murmured, "You ever seen anything like this, sir?" "No," Monroe said. "And I hope I never do again." The radio crackled. "Captain." Harper again. "We're losing fuel pressure. If we can't stay airborne, I suggest we." "Don't say it," Monroe cut in. "If one of us jumps, we both go down. We ride this out together." Harper was silent for a moment. Then, softly, "Copy that." A weak laugh came from Frankie in the navigator's chair. 2 birds, 1 sky. Monroe looked over. The boy's eyes were glassy, face pale. Blood darkened his sleeve. Yet he smiled faintly. "Never thought I'd fly with another plane sitting on top of me." "Don't make a habit of it," Wolf said, managing a grim grin. The intercom sputtered again. Jennings' voice, faint now. "Sir," one of the top crews leaning out, "he's saluting us." Monroe turned his head. Through the roof glass, distorted by cracks and soot, he could just make out a figure in the upper cockpit, a silhouette framed by firelight. The man raised his hand, slow and deliberate. Monroe felt something shift inside him. A strange, quiet understanding passed between them. They were strangers, yet bound tighter than brothers. The air grew colder. The moon slid behind clouds. The engines coughed. Monroe reached for the radio. "Dove, this is Hawk. You still with me?" A pause. Then Harper's calm, weary voice, "Still here, Hawk. Still flying." The altimeter dipped again. 7,000 feet. Then 6,800. The fuel gauge blinked red. Monroe stared into the darkness ahead. The channel was still too far. The land below, unknown. Maybe France. Maybe Germany. Maybe nowhere. "Dove," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "you keep those wings steady. I'll carry you as long as I can." "I trust you," Harper said. The radio went silent. The engines hummed like tired hearts. Monroe looked out once more at the wounded sky. Tracer fire glowed faintly on the horizon, distant but closing. He tightened his grip on the controls. "Come on, girl," he whispered to the plane. "Don't die on me yet." The night swallowed their voices. 2 bombers, fused by chance, bound by survival, drifted into the dark, smoke trailing like a single black ribbon across the stars. And for the first time that night, Captain Elias Monroe was afraid of silence. Because silence meant they were still falling. Because silence meant the sky hadn't decided their fate, yet. The silence after the roar was almost unbearable. For hours the air had been alive with thunder, flak, engines, screaming men, but now it was only the creak of twisted aluminum and the faint, rhythmic wheeze of dying engines. The sky was bruised, fading from fire to ash. 2 B-17s drifted through it like ghosts, welded together by catastrophe, carrying 2 crews who had no idea whether they were alive or already dead. Captain Elias Munro sat rigid in the cockpit of Heaven's Door, his hands locked around the yoke as though letting go might unmake the fragile miracle that kept them airborne. The controls trembled, resisting his touch. Each vibration was a reminder, this machine was no longer meant to fly. Through the shattered glass above him he could just make out the underbelly of the other bomber, Mary Jane, resting across his own fuselage like a coffin lid. The image wouldn't leave him, their wings intertwined, their fates sealed. A burst of static crackled through the radio. "This is Harper. You still with me, Hawk?" Munro swallowed the dryness in his throat. "Still flying, Dove." "Barely." He heard the other man exhale, a sound that carried relief and resignation in equal measure. "One of my gunners didn't make it. The rest are hanging on." "You?" "Navigators hit but stable. Everyone else breathing." He paused, the word breathing tasting strange, as if it were a temporary condition. The 2 planes groaned as one. A low metallic sigh passed through the airframe. Somewhere behind him, Sergeant Wolfe was tending to Frankie, wrapping his arm in bandages torn from a flight jacket. The kid was pale but conscious, murmuring half-formed words about home. Munro's gaze drifted to the fuel gauge. The needle hovered just above empty. "We're leaking fast," he muttered. "You got any power to climb?" Harper asked. "Not a chance. The best I can do is keep her level." Munro adjusted the trim, feeling the sluggish response. "We're losing altitude by the minute. If we drop too low, we'll burn." Another pause crackled over the airwaves. "Then we glide. Together." Munro allowed himself a grim smile. "You make it sound easy." "It's either that or die separately," Harper said. "And I've had enough of dying." The words hung in the cockpit like the scent of fuel, heavy and inescapable. Munro didn't answer. Instead, he watched the horizon blur beneath a curtain of smoke. The sun was dipping, washing the clouds in the color of blood. Somewhere below, the land waited, Europe, enemy territory, fields and forests crawling with soldiers who would shoot them on sight. Wolfe climbed forward from the waist section, his face streaked with grime. "Sir, the tail's gone. We're flying on prayers." "Keep praying, then," Munro said. His voice sounded steadier than he felt. "How's the kid?" "Out cold. Shock setting in. But he'll live if we do." That was always the condition, if. Another violent shudder rocked the plane. The sound of metal scraping on metal echoed through the fuselage. Munro's stomach lurched. He grabbed the mic again. "Dove, what was that?" "Shift in weight. One of our engines broke loose. It's hanging by the mount. Can you jettison it?" "Not without tearing us both apart." Munro swore under his breath. "Then hold steady. If that thing drops, it'll take my right wing with it." He heard Harper's answer, clipped and controlled, "Copy that, Captain. We'll keep it chained." For several minutes, there was only the droning hum of the remaining engines. The rhythm was hypnotic, like a dying heartbeat. Munro's mind began to drift, to the image of his mother standing at the train platform the day he left for war. She'd pressed a letter into his hand, whispering, "Come home in one piece." He'd laughed then, young and arrogant, certain that death was something that happened to other men. Now, staring at the riveted ceiling of his floating tomb, he wondered if she would ever know what became of him. A sharp voice broke his thoughts. "Captain, we've got fire in the number 3. Wolf shouted. Monroe twisted in his seat. The reflection in the windshield showed it clearly, a bloom of flame near the starboard engine. "Get the extinguisher," he barked. "Now." Wolf was already moving. The smell of burning oil filled the cabin. Monroe's eyes stung. He throttled back, trying to cut the airflow, but the control levers were stiff. Every adjustment sent vibrations through the airframe and into his bones. The radio spat static again. "Hawk, we see it. Your right engine's cooking. We're venting pressure to help drag the flame off." "Do it," Monroe coughed, waving smoke from his face. "But don't overcompensate. You're sitting on my back, remember." "Hard to forget that," Harper muttered. Seconds passed like years. Then, slowly, the flames began to die, replaced by black smoke curling into the night sky. Wolf stumbled back to his seat, coughing. "Fire's out." Monroe nodded, though relief didn't come. The plane still trembled beneath his hands. "Good work. Check on Frankie again. And see if Jennings is still answering." He knew the answer before Wolf reached for the intercom. Silence. Just the faint crackle of static, and the wind screaming through the bullet holes. "Tail gun's dead," Wolf said quietly. No response. Monroe's jaw tightened. "Mark it. But don't tell the kid yet." Outside, the clouds thinned. Below, dark fields spread out, stitched together by rivers that glimmered faintly under the moon. For the first time since the collision, Monroe could see the ground clearly. It was both a comfort and a curse. The earth meant safety, but only if they could reach it alive. "Dove," he said into the mic, "I've got visual on land. Looks like France." "Occupied France," Harper replied. "Better than the Channel. We ditch there, we freeze. I'll take a bullet over the sea any day." Monroe allowed himself a low chuckle. "Careful what you wish for." The two men spoke like old friends, though they'd never met before this nightmare. Their voices were the only thread holding back the darkness. Each word was a small rebellion against the silence pressing in around them. Then Harper's tone shifted. "Hawk, we've still got a full bomb load." Monroe's stomach dropped. "Tell me they're disarmed." "Not yet. We were forming up for the drop when the flak hit." "Jesus Christ." Monroe glanced up through the glass, as if he could see the bombs through the belly of the other plane. "You're sitting on 6,000 pounds of explosives right above me." "7," Harper corrected grimly. Monroe's pulse quickened. "You need to get rid of them. If I open the doors, they'll fall straight through your fuselage. Then we figure something else out." Harper hesitated. "We've got one stuck in the rack. We can't reach it. The rest, we might jettison them sideways, if we roll a few degrees." "You roll, we spin," Monroe said. "We won't survive the torque." "Then what do you suggest, Captain?" Monroe didn't answer right away. His eyes darted across the failing instruments, searching for a miracle in the gauges. There wasn't one. "We keep them. And we pray they stay where they are." "Understood," Harper said softly. "It's a sky coffin, then." The word struck Monroe like shrapnel, sky coffin. That was exactly what it was. Two dead machines clinging to each other in defiance of gravity. Two crews waiting for the inevitable. Wolf returned to the cockpit and dropped into the co-pilot's seat. His eyes were bloodshot. "We can't keep this up forever, sir. The wings won't hold." "I know," Monroe said. "We just need to make it past dawn. Maybe catch a friendly patrol." "Or a German one," Wolf replied. He looked out through the cracked glass, where tracer fire flickered faintly on the horizon. "They'll see us soon enough." Monroe didn't answer. The world outside felt distant, dreamlike, the steady rhythm of the engines lulling him into a dangerous calm. He forced himself to stay alert, to listen to the whisper of the controls, to feel every vibration as if the plane were speaking to him in its dying language. "Dove," he called. "You still with me?" "Barely," Harper said. "Half my crew's unconscious. We're sealing the aft hatch to keep the pressure." "Good. Keep them warm. Cold'll kill faster than the flak." "Copy that." A pause. "You ever think about how strange it is? Two planes stuck together, trying to keep each other alive." Monroe smiled wearily. "Like two drowning men refusing to let go. Maybe that's all war is." The radio went quiet again. Monroe stared out into the endless dark. He wanted to argue, to say something about duty, or honor, or victory, but the words wouldn't come. They sounded too small now. Hours passed. The horizon brightened slightly, a dull gray smear before dawn. The first hint of light revealed the damage in cruel detail: holes stitched across the wings, a tail nearly torn off, smoke trailing like a funeral shroud. The sight should have terrified him. Instead, he felt an odd peace. They were still here. Against all logic, they were still flying. Wolf checked his watch. "We've been in the air 6 hours since Bremen." "Feels like 6 years," Monroe said. His voice was raw. Then came the sound, a deep, coughing groan from the engines above. Harper's voice followed, tight and urgent. "We're losing engine 4. I can't keep it spinning." "Feather it," Monroe shouted. "Don't fight it." "I can't, she's jammed." A deafening crack split the air. The entire structure lurched. Monroe's head slammed against the headrest. For a second, everything went weightless, the plane tipping, rolling, struggling against its own imbalance. "Dove," he yelled. Static. Then Harper's voice, faint but determined, "Still here." "Lost the prop." It tore clean off. Monroe steadied the yoke with both hands, muscles burning. "We're dropping fast. 4,500 and falling. Can you hold her?" "I can try." He could hear Harper breathing hard on the other end. The man sounded like he was holding the entire sky on his shoulders. "If we go down," Harper said quietly, "make sure it's quick." Monroe's reply was equally quiet. "Not my plan." The sun began to rise, spilling thin light through the cracks. For a brief, fragile moment, the two bombers looked almost beautiful, silver ghosts against a pink horizon, the scars of battle glowing like veins of fire. Monroe caught his reflection in the fractured glass, blood on his cheek, eyes sunken, face aged by hours. He barely recognized himself. Yet beneath the exhaustion, there was something else: resolve. He pressed the transmit switch. "Dove, listen to me. We're not done. There's an open field ahead, maybe 3 miles. We try for it. No heroics, just keep your plane steady and your men breathing." "Copy that," Harper said. His voice cracked but held firm. "You lead, Hawk. I'll follow." Monroe almost laughed. "You're already on my back." A faint chuckle came through the radio, thin but real. Then silence again, filled only by the steady beat of the engines, their shared pulse. The land below drew closer. Monroe could see the faint line of a river, a cluster of trees, a patch of open ground that might be salvation, or a grave. The gauges screamed warning after warning. The airframe groaned like a dying animal. Wolf leaned forward, gripping the console. "She's not going to hold, sir." "She will," Monroe said, though he didn't believe it. "She has to." The sky seemed to narrow around them, folding into a single point of light ahead. Monroe took a deep breath, every muscle in his arms taut. He could hear Harper's voice, steadying him across the static. "Together, Hawk," the man said. "All the way down." "Together," Monroe answered. The planes dipped toward the earth, their shadows merging against the pale dawn. For an instant, they looked less like wreckage and more like one defiant creature refusing to die. Then the engines coughed again, sputtering into silence. The air grew heavy, thick with inevitability. Monroe whispered a single word, to his crew, to Harper, to the sky itself. Hold. And as the twin bombers began their long descent into the unknown, the radio went dead, leaving only the whisper of wind and the faint, rhythmic beat of two hearts still refusing to surrender. The world below was a blur of gray and flame. The two fused B-17s, one crippled, one clinging, drifted through a wounded sky like a dying bird. Inside the cockpit of the lower fortress, Lieutenant Jack Reynolds felt every vibration through the metal seat beneath him. The instruments were dead, the fuel gauge was frozen at empty, though the reek of leaking fuel told him otherwise. Smoke licked at his boots from somewhere behind the cockpit bulkhead, curling upward in lazy, poisonous fingers. "Howard, talk to me." Jack's voice cracked through the interphone. The upper ship's radio crackled back, a faint, labored breath. "I'm still here," came Captain Howard Kane's voice, ragged with strain. "Top turret's gone. We're losing altitude, she's bleeding out fast." Jack stared out through the shattered canopy. Above him, the belly of Howard's fortress was mangled metal and burning fuel. The collision had fused their frames, Howard's B-17 sitting squarely atop Jack's, held together by twisted steel and desperation. They were now one machine, half alive, half dead. "Feather the props on 2 and 3, Jack said, fighting the yoke. "We can't hold her like this." "Already tried," Howard wheezed. Number 3's jammed solid. The sky outside churned with enemy flak bursts. Far off, he could see the rest of the formation shrinking toward the horizon, tiny silver crosses fleeing west, toward England and safety. No one had stayed behind. No one could. The air was filled with the sound of dying engines and wind clawing at the fuselage. The crew, what was left of them, moved like ghosts through the smoke. Corporal Eddie Vargas, the ball turret gunner, had crawled into the radio room, one arm slick with blood. "Tail's gone," he muttered, collapsing beside the bulkhead. "We've got no elevator control." Jack pressed a hand to Vargas's shoulder. "You're not dying here, Eddie. You hear me?" The young man laughed weakly. "With respect, sir, we already are." The smell of fuel thickened. Howard's voice returned on the interphone. "Jack, if we don't separate soon, that fire'll eat through the wing. We'll go up before we hit the ground." Jack stared through the canopy. The ground below was distant but drawing nearer, patchwork fields, blackened craters, rivers of smoke winding like veins. He did the math in his head. Altitude, under 10,000 feet. Descent rate, rising fast. "We can't jettison," Jack said. "Your ship's pinned into mine." The tail sections locked. A long silence followed. Then Howard said, almost to himself, "You think fate glued us together, Jack?" Jack gritted his teeth. "I think fate's got a sick sense of humor." The radio hissed. Static and German chatter broke through. Somewhere nearby, flak guns continued to bark. The sky was an orchestra of chaos, and they were the final note. Jack checked the control yoke again. The ship responded sluggishly, heavy as lead. His hands were trembling, not from fear, but exhaustion. His oxygen mask hung useless around his neck. The bombardier, Lieutenant Collins, stumbled forward from the nose compartment, his face smeared with soot. "Sir, bombs are gone, but we're still carrying enough fuel to light half of France." "Then let's pray they're out of matches," Jack muttered. He looked up through the shattered canopy again. He could just make out Howard's silhouette leaning over the edge of his cockpit, peering down. The man looked pale, sweat tracing black streaks down his face. Their eyes met for a heartbeat through the fire and smoke, two pilots bound by a nightmare. You got survivors? Jack called. Howard shook his head. Only my co-pilot. Barely. The air around them shimmered with heat. The two planes, locked in their fiery embrace, groaned as if alive. Every gust of wind sent metal grinding against metal, a shriek like tortured steel. Howard's voice came again, faint. You think we can make it back across the channel? Jack gave a humorless laugh. We'll be lucky to clear the next hill. A burst of flak tore through the air just off their right wing. Shrapnel pinged off the fuselage. The fortress shuddered, banking slightly, and Jack fought the controls with both hands. Easy. Howard shouted through the interphone. You roll, I roll. We're still linked. Jack steadied it. His jaw clenched. We're not dying over Germany. Not like this. The interphone fell silent again, the hum of static returning. Below deck, the engineer, Sergeant Murphy, crawled toward the cockpit, coughing violently. His face was ash-gray, his eyes wide with disbelief. Sir, he croaked, the fire's spreading aft. If it hits the tanks. Jack knew what that meant. Get the chutes ready. Anyone who can jump, jumps. Murphy hesitated. And you? I'll hold her steady as long as I can. Murphy nodded and disappeared into the smoke. Jack leaned back, exhaling through gritted teeth. The yoke shook in his hands. His eyes burned. The sweat on his temples tasted of salt and fear. Howard's voice cut through again. Jack, if you're planning to stay, you're an idiot. I've been called worse. A pause. Then, softly, we'll make it count. The sound of the fire grew louder, a living thing devouring its prey. The metal underfoot was burning hot now. Jack could feel it through his boots. He pictured the bomb bay, the torn fuselage, the dangling bodies of his crew, men who'd been laughing only an hour ago. Howard, he said, if we can nose down together, we might glide her into a field. Belly landing. Or we tear apart midair. Jack smirked faintly. Either way, it's over quick. Howard's response was almost a whisper. I'll take quick. For a moment, they both said nothing. Only the wind spoke, howling through shattered glass. Then Jack began the descent. He trimmed the flaps, fighting the drag, easing the yoke forward. The twin hulks dipped together, like two dancers locked in a final bow. The smoke poured back into the cabin, forcing him to squint. His lungs burned. The fields below grew larger, patches of green and brown blurred by speed and altitude. Steady, Howard muttered over the line. Steady. The plane jolted. A section of the upper fuselage tore loose, spiraling into the void. Howard. Jack shouted. I'm still here. They were under 5,000 feet now. Jack could hear the whistle of air through the bullet holes in the canopy. He could hear Vargas praying in Spanish behind him. He could hear the creaking of rivets bending under strain. And then, gunfire. Tracer round streaked past the nose from a cluster of trees below. A German anti-aircraft position, still firing at a dying ship. Jack swore. Of course they're still shooting. Howard's laugh was dry and broken. Wouldn't want to die of boredom. Jack angled the nose lower. The world rushed upward. Wind screamed. The ground spun. He leveled again, heart hammering. Murphy! Get the wounded out. Jack barked. The engineer's voice crackled back faintly, 2 already gone. Vargas is hit bad. Collins, he's not moving. Jack closed his eyes briefly. He could feel the war crushing down on him, every mission, every loss, every name. Howard's voice came again, quiet but steady. Jack, listen. If one of us has a chance to live, it's you. I'm going to cut my engines, see if I can drop off clean. Jack's head snapped up. You'll rip me apart if you try that. Maybe. But maybe I'll fall away. Maybe you'll make it. Howard, don't. Tell my wife, tell her I tried. The line went dead. Jack saw it happen in slow motion. The upper fortress lurched, metal groaning as Howard killed his engines. For a heartbeat, it held. Then gravity claimed it. The two planes separated with a scream of tearing steel. The upper B-17 rolled away, trailing fire, a comet in daylight. Jack could see the canopy blow off, a figure struggling to bail out, but the smoke swallowed him whole. Jack's own fortress, suddenly lightened, pitched forward violently. He grabbed the yoke, pulling with everything left in him. The ground filled his vision. Come on, he hissed through clenched teeth. Come on, you bastard. The aircraft leveled, barely. It skimmed low, engines coughing, wings wobbling. He saw a field ahead, a flat patch of grass, littered with smoking craters. He lined up. Closed the throttles. The wheels were gone, but that didn't matter. Impact. The world turned white and soundless. When the noise returned, it came as ringing, distant and hollow. Jack's body was thrown against the harness. Smoke poured into the cockpit, but the fire had dimmed. The ship slid across the field, tearing up soil and sparks until it groaned to a halt. Silence. Jack sat there, trembling. His hands still gripped the yoke. His ears rang. His eyes darted to the canopy. The sky above was burning, a funeral pyre for 1,000 dreams. He unbuckled, stumbled to his feet, and forced the canopy open. Cool air rushed in, thick with smoke. He climbed out, collapsing onto the grass. He turned and looked back. The fortress lay in ruins, its wings snapped, its name, Silver Ghost, barely visible beneath soot and ash. Jack fell to his knees. His heart ached with something deeper than exhaustion, something that no war manual could ever define. He raised his eyes to the horizon, where a faint parachute flickered in the distance, too far, too low. Howard's ship was gone. The wind carried only the faint echo of his last words. Tell her I tried. Jack closed his eyes. The grass whispered in the breeze. The world was burning, but he was still breathing. He didn't yet know why. He only knew that the sky had given him back his life, and taken everything else. The wreckage still smoked when dawn broke across the fields of northern France. Mist clung to the broken wings like ghosts reluctant to leave. Jack Reynolds stood amid the twisted remains of the Silver Ghost, his body aching, his flight jacket torn and darkened with soot. The wind whispered through the ruins of the B-17s, two machines once soaring symbols of power, now reduced to hollow carcasses. He didn't know how long he'd been standing there. Minutes, maybe hours. The only sound was the distant hum of artillery, somewhere beyond the horizon. The war hadn't stopped. It never did. Jack's breath trembled as he stared at the blackened fields. Fragments of both bombers were scattered like confessions across the grass. A tail section here. A piece of engine there. The air smelled of oil, metal, and something faintly human. He found Howard's dog tag an hour later, half buried in mud near a patch of burned grass. The chain was broken. The tag itself was warped from heat, but the name was still legible, Kane, Howard J. Jack knelt, his hands shaking as he lifted it from the dirt. His reflection shimmered faintly on its scorched surface, a man he barely recognized. He clenched the tag in his fist, feeling the edges bite into his palm. He whispered, "You tried, Howard. God knows you did." A sound carried on the wind, a rustle of fabric, faint but real. Jack's head snapped toward the treeline. For a heartbeat, his pulse spiked. He stumbled forward, boots sinking into the soft soil, eyes scanning the mist. A parachute. It hung like a broken flag from a branch at the edge of the forest, tangled and fluttering weakly in the breeze. Jack ran to it, heart hammering. Beneath it, half covered in leaves, lay a body. Howard Kane. His flight suit was scorched, one boot missing. His face was pale, almost peaceful. The impact had done what the flames hadn't. Jack dropped to his knees beside him, his throat tightening. "Damn it, Howard," he reached out, brushing dirt from the man's brow. "You made it down." "Almost." Howard's eyes were half open, frozen in that last moment of falling. Jack shut them gently, then sat there in silence. The morning sun broke through the fog, striking the dog tag in his palm until it gleamed. The forest was quiet now. No gunfire, no engines. Just the sound of crows calling in the distance, mourning or mocking. Jack stayed until the sky turned gold. Then he dug with his hands. No shovel, no ceremony. Just a soldier burying another soldier, one more life folded into the earth. When he finished, he pressed the dog tag into the dirt atop the shallow grave. "You told me once," he murmured, "that war's just the sound of men trying not to die. Maybe that's true. But you gave it meaning." He stood, swaying slightly, and looked toward the distant horizon. Somewhere beyond those clouds was England. Home. Or what was left of it. He started walking. Each step was heavier than the last. His boots squelched in the mud, his uniform stiff with dried blood. The crash field faded behind him, swallowed by the mist. He carried nothing but a compass, a canteen half filled with ash-tainted water, and a promise he hadn't yet spoken aloud, to survive. The forest deepened. The air grew cold, the light dimmer. Jack kept moving, his thoughts flickering like broken film reels, faces of his crew, laughter on the airfield, the hum of engines before takeoff, Howard's last words. "Tell her I tried." He pictured Mrs. Kane, the photograph Howard kept tucked into his flight jacket, a woman with dark hair and kind eyes, holding a child in her arms. Jack wondered how many widows this war had made, how many letters he'd written that began with, "It is with deep regret." His throat tightened. He pressed forward. Hours passed. The sun sank low. He stumbled upon a dirt road carved through the forest. A cart sat abandoned in a ditch nearby, one wheel splintered, a loaf of bread frozen in the mud beside it. He crouched, listening. Nothing. Then, a voice. French, low and urgent. Jack turned sharply, raising his sidearm. A figure stepped from behind the trees, a woman in a dark cloak, carrying a rifle slung over her shoulder. Her face was streaked with soot, her eyes sharp and cautious. She spoke again, the words clipped. "Anglais." Jack lowered the gun slightly. "American. Air Corps." She hesitated, then nodded. "Resistance." She moved closer, scanning his tattered uniform, the blood, the burns. Her gaze softened slightly. "You fell?" Jack gave a dry laugh. "You could say that." She motioned for him to follow. "It is not safe here. The Germans patrol the roads." He hesitated, glancing back once toward the smoke rising in the distance. Then he nodded. They moved quickly through the undergrowth. She walked with silent precision, her steps deliberate, every motion honed by survival. Jack stumbled behind her, half limping. "What's your name?" he asked. "Claire," she said. "And you?" "Jack." "You are lucky, Jack. Many do not survive such a fall." He glanced at her. "Luck's a funny word." She didn't reply. The forest swallowed their footsteps. When they finally reached a small stone farmhouse, hidden among the hills, the sky was deepening to violet. Claire led him inside. The air smelled of smoke and stale bread. A single candle flickered on the table. An older man sat in the corner, cleaning a revolver. He looked up as they entered. "Another one?" he asked in French. Claire nodded. "American." The man grunted. "You bring death to our doorstep, girl." "He brings news," she said quietly. Jack sank into a chair, his body trembling from exhaustion. "I just need to rest," he muttered. The man studied him, then handed him a tin cup of water. "Rest quickly. Germans will come when they see the wrecks." Jack drank. The water was cold and bitter, but it steadied him. He stared into the candle flame. The flicker reminded him of the fire that had consumed the sky hours before. Claire sat across from him, watching. "You lost many?" Jack nodded slowly. "All." Her gaze softened. "You will see them again. In the wind, maybe. The sky remembers." He looked at her, something hollow in his chest stirring faintly. "The sky remembers everything," he said. "That's the problem." The old man extinguished the candle. "Sleep. Tomorrow we move. South, through the river." Jack didn't argue. He lay down on the cold floor, eyes open to the darkness above. The sounds of the night filtered through, the creak of wood, the murmur of wind, the distant growl of engines. He thought of Howard. Of the crew. Of the fire. And then, for the first time in days, he slept. When morning came, the air was tense. Claire woke him before dawn. "Patrols nearby," she whispered. "We must go." They slipped through the back door, into a gray dawn heavy with fog. Jack followed her down a narrow trail that led toward a river glinting faintly through the trees. As they moved, he caught sight of something overhead, a formation of bombers, silver dots against the morning light, engines droning like distant thunder. He stopped, frozen. B-17s. For a moment, the air vibrated with the sound of them, the same growl he'd known so well, the same rhythm of power and hope. Claire looked back. "What is it?" He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the sky. The bombers passed overhead, gliding east toward Germany. He watched until they became specks on the horizon, swallowed by the clouds. And in their wake, the silence returned. He whispered under his breath, "Fly safe, boys." They reached the river by mid-morning. A small wooden boat was hidden beneath a tarp. Claire uncovered it, gesturing for him to climb in. As they pushed off, the mist began to lift, revealing the world around them, green fields, distant farmhouses, and the faint smoke of war still rising far to the north. Jack looked back once more. The crash site was miles away now, invisible beyond the trees, but he could feel it, like a scar on the horizon. Claire rowed in silence. The oars dipped softly into the current, each stroke steady and sure. After a long while, she asked, "When the war ends, what will you do?" Jack stared into the water. His reflection wavered, eyes hollow, skin pale, the ghost of a man who'd fallen from the sky. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe, remember." She nodded, understanding more than he said. The river carried them onward, winding through fields and villages too quiet for peace. Above them, the sky stretched vast and endless, a blue grave holding 1,000 names. Jack tilted his head back, letting the wind brush his face. For the first time since the crash, he felt something almost like calm. He whispered, not to Claire, but to the air itself, "Maybe war isn't about who wins, but who's left to remember." The wind carried his words upward, vanishing into the great, silent sky. Somewhere above, he imagined two planes still locked together in eternal descent, burning, falling, but never forgotten. And beneath that endless expanse, Jack Reynolds kept moving forward, carrying the echoes of the sky within him.